November 11th, 1918. World War I ends, and America is thrust into a new era. Isolationism rules foreign policy, and uncertainty is widespread. Some look to the past, while others look forward into the future. The economy is booming, and new technologies such as automobiles are being created. This perfectly sets up the events of the Roaring Twenties.
The Roaring Twenties brought on dramatic social and economic change to America. In this period, women were challenging established social conventions like never before.
Flappers were women doing things that others would have considered unladylike at the time. They were dancing, wearing short skirts and bobbed hair, pushing past ideas that women were simply their appearance. In addition to bold new statements like flappers, women are finally able to vote.
This push forward in social equality between men and women is what really drove America forward after World War I, and these lasting changes still affect society today.
In addition to the women's rights movement, another movement simultaneously emerges, the temperance movement. With roots all the way back to the Enlightenment era, this progressive movement is one that comes back with invigorated determination.
As these soldiers from World War I came back to their homes, they found that they could not really cope with the trauma that they had experienced in the war, now known as PTSD. They soon turned to alcohol for their stress, which resulted into the beating of their wives. As this of course angered many, the idea of banning alcohol quickly grew in popularity among the American people.
On January 29th, 1919, the 18th Amendment is passed. Many believe this to be the end of problems with alcohol in America, but others see this as an opportunity to expand their wealth and influence.
After alcohol was made illegal, these speakeasies started to open up all around the country, run by mafias and gangs. Because there's still an incredible demand, they managed to make a lot of money in a very small amount of time, giving them economic leverage like never before.
Gang infighting soon climaxes to all-out war, an example being the Valentine Massacre. This incident brings prohibition to question, and brings to light the multiple issues which emerged from the passing of it. For example, taxing alcohol is impossible, as its sale is all done illegally following the act. With these new realizations, the 21st Amendment is passed, making the 18th Amendment the first and only amendment to ever be repealed. While prohibition is a large part of the Roaring Twenties, other cultural influences also shaped the daily lives of those living at the time, through the onset of new African American ideas in music, art, and literature, which stem from many African Americans moving north to find better lives, an event now known as the Great Migration.
The Great Migration really created this idea that African Americans were able to move up in social class, and they saw moving north as a way to achieve this. In the South, even with Reconstruction, they were largely stuck in what class they were born to. This was really because of the lack of opportunities they had, as well as the fact that they were being oppressed by groups like the KKK.
The migration north is caused by the new opportunities available in places like Henry Ford's factories, with staggeringly high $5 wages a day, as well as the prejudice against them. This migration eventually leads to the rising up of African American culture into the mainstream, known as the Harlem Renaissance. Writers like Langston Hughes and composers like Louis Armstrong infused traditional American culture with new African American culture, and as such create new things such as jazz. Along with the Harlem Renaissance comes other influences in culture, coming from the lost generation. Writers and artists emerge from these broken people, and they begin to create art and literature such as The Great Gatsby, and the amazing talent displayed by people like Waldo Pierce. This period of happiness and prosperity would, however, not last forever. October 29th, 1929, Black Tuesday, the day that the New York stock market crashes. This will lead to the start of an economic downfall of the United States, known as the Great Depression. Following World War I, America is in an almost 10-year period of economic prosperity, fueled by consumerism and shadowed by isolationism. With the roaring 20s come increased national industrialization, as well as the creation of new products. The economic successes create disposable income for the first time in American history, and businesses understand this all too well. Intensive advertising campaigns are launched, attempting to convince the average buyer that they require certain products and will be an outcast to society without them. With this, people begin buying new, unnecessary products, but even with their disposable income, they run into a problem. So many products are advertised and bought, money again becomes a problem, as disposable income is being disposed of. With all of these purchases, payment plans are created, but misused by the inexperienced population.
These people were buying on margin, taking a lot of loans they couldn't pay back. The top 1% of the country owned almost a third of the nation's wealth. Banks were loaning money to reckless speculators. It was just a house of cards waiting to fall down.
And indeed, the house comes crashing down, with the entire market cut in half in one single day. The effects? Devastating. A record 16 million shares lose almost all of their value as the day progresses. For some stocks, no buyers can be found at any price. By the end of the day, panic has erupted, and the next few weeks continue the downward spiral. In a matter of 10 short weeks, the value of the entire market is cut in half. Herbert Hoover, the president at the time, backs away from the situation.
Hoover was a strict laissez-faire believer. He believed if he didn't touch the situation, the economy would reset itself and would eventually be back on track. That's why we usually associate the blame of the Great Depression on Hoover.
Millions are out of work as unemployment soars to almost 25%. 1 of 4 Americans are out of jobs, and the effects of the Depression can be felt across the globe. Germany's economy and banking system collapses after bankers who issued loans to Germany for reparations from World War I recalled their loans. The Dust Bowl hits, and the economy plummets even farther into oblivion.
The Dust Bowl was not so much the straw that broke the camel's back, but rather the brick that dropped on him years after his back was broken. Adding insult to the injury, the Dust Bowl came at an already economically devastating time for the U.S. At this point, America really needed something to pull it out of the Great Depression, and fast.
The election of 1933 comes at a time of political turmoil. Herbert Hoover is running for his second term, and his opponent, Franklin D. Roosevelt, states that he will make the government help pull the country out of debt, and he wins the election with 472 electoral votes.
Roosevelt flooded the economy with government aid and government positions, trying to get Americans back into work by issuing things like the SSA, the FHA, and his New Deal programs.
The New Deal programs under FDR's bigger plan are the 3 R's. Provide relief for those out of work, provide recovery to businesses and the economy, and reform America's economic institutions. Things like the CCC and WPA help keep Americans from starving on the streets. Government involvement is unmatched in American history, trying to motivate Americans into getting jobs. The president also sits down and consoles the country, giving his popular fireside chats, in which he talks to the public about the state of the country.
These fireside chats helped Americans to understand what was happening. Imagine the president in your living room telling you what was going on in the country. It was unimaginable at that time.
As with every solution, there come opponents. These opponents of FDR's New Deal say that he overstepped his boundaries on what he can do, pushing the extent of the federal government. Some key opponents of the New Deal are the Supreme Court, striking down the AAA to show that the federal government is overstepping its boundaries. Many conservatives and liberals oppose his impositions onto the state government. Though FDR faces much opposition to the New Deal, he is able to make labor unions rise once again. The federal government is more actively involved in regulating labor, allowing for labor unions to gain power in safe working conditions. In the end, America witnessed a growth and change unparalleled at the time, that eventually leads to the house of cards all falling on top of each other, changing America into what we know today.